this greenheart from Scotland, and it was made by a guy who set a world record, and he was a violin maker, so he knew woods, and he made a double-handed salmon rod. So he knew the vibrations in wood, so he made rods that casted just beautifully, and this is one of them. And they're very, you know, the greenheart's very heavy. This rod here is 16 foot, I believe it was. So to counterbalance the weight of these rods, because they're very heavy, they have these big brass reels. And if you've ever ground coffee in the morning, you know what that sounds like. It sounds like that. That's what, I mean, they weren't really a smooth reel, like our reels today, you know. They're a little bit, and they're a little on the rough side, you know. But nevertheless, and this reel is from 18, I think it was 1893 or 1894, somewhere in there. But it still works, and it's, you know, sounds like an old coffee grinder, but still works and holds a lot of line. When I got it, it had a silk line on it, but that was all matted up, so I had to remove it, and I put on a more modern Scandi line on it. But it casts very well, you know. So, but again, they use those big heavy reels to counterbalance the weight of the rod. You know, like I said, this rod's 16 feet. I think overall this whole thing weighs 6 pounds and 3 ounces with the rod reel and line. So that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're casting a 16-foot rod, it can be a lot. You had to have a big breakfast in the morning before you use these rods. All right. A greenheart rod with a spliced ferrule. And what they did back in the day is they wrapped them with wet rawhide. When the rawhide dried, it would stay tight against the rod. And if you've ever seen these big tall buildings they got along some of the beach in Scotland and Ireland and Norway, they would stick these big long rods in there so they didn't have to keep taking them apart. And this is a spliced ferrule. You can see here it's a splice. So that's the wrap. And if you're familiar with rod wrapping, it's just a matter of putting a loop in there. You put a loop in there, you wrap over the loop, you pull the loop back, pull it back that way, and that tightens it up. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to use some tape, because this rod's 121 years old and I don't want to break it. And I'm not going to trust this stuff I'm using right here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to put some tape on that thing and then we'll do some casting. So the advantage of a splice rod is you can see there's a uniform bend that goes through there, as where if you have a metal ferrule, you've got a bending portion that goes into a stiff part and then another bending part on top of that. And what you create is you create a spot in between the rod that's stiff. These rods were made to bend just like a branch on a tree. It bends all the way through, a nice curve like that. And when they unload, they cast very well. Who made a 24-foot rod out of greenheart. He casted 69 yards. Now, if you think about that on a football field, that's a big cast. That's 1895. That record got broken in 2005. And what does that say for all our modern technology with all these fancy rods we got nowadays? If you can't cast, you can't cast. I don't care what rod you got. This greenheart has got twice the strength as white oak. Everybody associates spays with this long distance casting, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's just that if you're fishing a big river and you need to throw a big cast, these rods will do it. So what I have here is an Ogden Smith bamboo, built 19 1907. Just think of that. It went through World War I, World War II. So this rod is an Ogden Smith, made in England. He was known for his salmon rods. But anyway, it was pretty bad shape, but I took it apart and redid it, and it come out look pretty nice. The unique part of this is, the neat thing about this is the locking ferrule, metal ferrules. But watch this. Goes together like this. It rotates and it locks on. Ironically, the guides are all in line once you lock that on. That amazes me that they come up with that. It didn't last very long. Hardy thought it was too heavy for their rods. But it's kind of a unique feature. Primarily his salmon rods were his big, well known for his salmon rods. Double-handed salmon rods, not a spey rod. Let's keep that straight. There's no such thing as a spey rod. And I think some of the confusion in that is for guys that are single-handed casters go, yeah, because I've been in groups where, you know, you mentioned spey and there's guys get really excited. Some guys go, yeah, I've heard about it. Other guy goes, yeah, I don't need it. You don't need it, you do need it. And when we cast those little rods, you'll see what I'm talking about. You can change position without all that false casting and all that disturbing the water. It's just so cool. But again, these English snake guides, they go the other way as opposed to ours, so it's you wouldn't think that it would be confusing, but it is. Of course, it don't take much to confuse me. Theirs twist the other way, ours twist this way. It's just a little thing, but it's kind of funny how, and they're made out of tungsten, by the way, as I find out. Well, we'll put a fly on here and we'll just see what this guy can do here. There's 241 wraps on this rod. That's with both tips. It took me just about 3 weeks to complete it. Now, I wasn't on it every day, but I'd walk away from it because I got so sick of wrapping it. Them some nice casts there, Dick. Seriously. Oh, yeah. They're pulling tight to the reel every time. See that sturgeon jump out there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Down there?
Yeah. Yeah, he came right out of the water. They're getting ready to migrate now. Now, this is a shooting head, and everybody says, oh, I don't like shooting heads, but I do use a weight forward. Weight forwards are shooting heads. Think about it. All the weight's concentrated in the front, and you got a running line behind it. This is a shooting head with monofilament running behind it. That's the only difference. Bottom hand out, pull the bottom hand. In those days they used, first they started with horsehair braided. They used white so they could dye it different colors. And then they went to horsehair and silk. Then they went to all silk. There's a lot of intimidation with all that. You got to have a $500, $600 rod. I've casted with guys that got $1,500 double-handed rods. You know what they do with them? They tried for a while and then they give up on it. I also have friends, Dave Pinskowski from Milwaukee, as a matter of fact, who is one of the premier spey casters on the Great Lakes. Is the guy that introduced me to this whole sport. I got to slow down with this rod. Okay, here we go. There. Nice cast. I didn't do nothing and it just went. Keep in mind, this rod's 121 years old, I think, did I say? So that nice smooth lift Come around, anchor, cast, and go. All right, cut. I'm getting used to this rod now. This thing casts, man.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.